Hey, welcome back. I'm DG Wiggins. Today marks the first day of my 2018 November NanoWriMo Outlining experience. This year around, I'm going to try something a little bit different. I've worked with a lot of different types of software to try and capture my thoughts, capture my outlines before, both for other endeavors and for writing. This time I'm going to try a piece of software called iMindMap, which is it's essentially a glorified diagram editor. There's a free trial version of this. There's also free diagram editors out there if that's something you're into. I have tried Snowflake, I've tried diagramming in Scrivener, I've tried using cards, I've tried using a ton of different things, and this is just something else I'm going to try. Usually what happens is I end up getting all of my ideas out. They're great for brain dumping. Sometimes they're good for brainstorming, but often what happens to me at least is that I feel like I get to the end, I have an outline that I'm proud of, but it's not complete. There's going to be holes in it, and so whatever technique that I use, I want it to be able to help me identify where the holes are up front, because this time I really want to go into this NaNoWriMo or with this story that I've been thinking about for a long time with a really good outline that doesn't have a lot of holes in it, or hopefully none. This is a paid piece of software. They're not paying me. This is not a paid promotion or anything like that. It's just something that I've had on my mind for a long time, and if you like it, you can get it yourself. Ultimately, it is just a diagram editor, and you can use, Visio, or there's a couple of free diagram editors out there. You can just Google, online diagram editor, and I'm sure there's like stuff on websites that you could use as well. Alright, so this is iMindMap, the software. This is the opening screen. I want to jump into fast capture mode, I think, right from the beginning, because my goal here is to just lay out basically a skeleton of my novel. There's a few things that I've learned in writing in the past that I want to incorporate into my plot. One of those things is 3-act structure. Another one of those things is sort of an analysis of character motives. I want to ensure that there's good pacing throughout my novel, so I want to make sure there are some good action points. And so I want to build out sort of a skeleton that's going to force me to at least realize that I don't have enough to meet all of my personal requirements up front. I've used this once or twice before, not a lot, but in capture mode it starts off by giving me just this initial node called central idea. I'm going to start off by renaming that to being my novel. I could call this my actual novel title, but I don't have a title currently. I have a few rolling around in my head, but I feel like until you start writing, you're not going to really know what the title of your book's going to be, and maybe even up until the day you publish. So I'm just going to keep it generic for now. I'm going to call it my novel. From here, I can hit enter, and it'll give me another text box, and it'll give me an opportunity to branch off of this. So I know, for instance, that I want 3-act structure. Now, one thing that I have learned about 3-act structure is that ultimately it's more kind of like 4-act structure in my head. You have your first act, you have your second act, but your second act ends up being your entire middle, which ends up being about twice as long as your first act and your third act. And so I like to break it up into Act 1, Act 2.1, Act 2.2, and then Act 3. Kind of just to ensure that I have enough content in that Act 2, that I'm not writing and then I get through everything I had planned for Act 2, get to Act 3, and I have not enough content for an actual novel. It doesn't feel like a novel, it ends up being more like a short story. So we'll start with that, Act 1, and then we'll go back to this initial node. Act 2, and I said I was going to do 2.1 and 2.2, so let's rename that. Back to my novel, and then Act 3. And you kind of see how this is building up sort of a web. There's another way that I can look at this in sort of brainstorm mode, where it lays it out in a much broader view, and we'll get to that eventually. But at least starting from here, this gives me something to work from. Now, from each of these acts, one thing that I like to ensure that I have at the end of each act is some sort of major catastrophe, some sort of action high point. So I'm going to have a bubble that comes off of each of these. Call it big action. Now by doing this, I'm just putting out sort of the abstract ideas. I have 3 acts and I want action in each of them. Yeah, duh. But when I come back to all this, I'm going to want to go through and actually add nodes coming off of all of these circles that sort of defines what each of those things are. Now there are some other parts of the story that I want to define off of each of these acts. For instance, in Act 1, I'm going to want to have character introductions, scene definition, sort of, defining the overall story. So let's add a few of those. Actually, I don't want to introduce all of my characters, but at least the main ones, I think. So we'll have the scene with the main character introduction. And then we'll have perhaps a scene that really defines or explains to the reader what this world is the story world is going to be like. In Act 3, I'm going to want to have sort of this final battle that can be the big action at the end of Act 3, but I'm also going to want some sort of resolution. Before the big action, I'm also going to want to have sort of a point of desperation, I think. In Acts 2.1 and 2.2, I kind of want this transition for my main character. In Act 2.1, I want my character to feel like they're kind of out of control, like they're kind of being driven. So I just want to have something in there, some note in here that basically says I need to maintain that sort of atmosphere. Like this character is kind of being thrown into the adventure world, into the conflict. They don't know what's going on, or maybe they do, but they don't really have any control over it. And then in Act 2.2, I want some scenes in there where the character really starts to kind of take control and make actions, make choices on their own accord, where they said, okay, I have sort of accepted that I'm in this conflict or in this story world or this adventure, and now I need to live with it. I need to deal with it. They start to kind of adapt, and this is all kind of pushing their story arc in a way, or it could be, but I want to make sure that I have those elements in my story, so I'm going to stick them in here. Now, this is obviously just the bare bones, and you might be watching this and thinking, duh, throughout the entire thing. Or maybe you're not, and maybe there's something that I'm missing, and if I am, feel free to let me know in the comments. These are just lessons learned that I've taken from past experiences writing, where I got done writing and I felt like, well, I really needed to add this, or really needed to add that. So from this, basically it's a skeleton, and I think in the next video what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and just brain dump into the skeleton. This skeleton makes sure that I have this structure, makes sure that I have the pieces of the story that I really need. As I go about adding more notes onto each of these circles, when I get done, I'm hoping what I'm going to see are maybe bare patches in our tree, our map, our web of ideas here. And from those bare patches, I'm going to know that I need to go and brainstorm solutions, brainstorm scenes, brainstorm motives, brainstorm whatever it needs to be able to flesh this out. And I won't be able to step away from this and say, okay, I have a complete outline, until basically I have a very dense, very filled out mind map as they call it in this software, of the entire story. So I mentioned before that there are other ways of viewing what we've built here. This is very limited, and on purpose it's very limited. It shows you one node and the nodes that are kind of hanging off of it. But I can come up here and go to Brainstorm, and here you can kind of see they've done the traditional corkboard layout that you've seen in maybe Scrivener or some other pieces of software. This is another way that I could have gone about doing things, but I wanted to try the other way. Another way that's a little even more complete, I think, is the mindmap view. Choose a style, yeah. So here you see my central node, and you kind of see these lines coming off of it to other main ideas, and from here I can build more. I can do more lines like this. I don't have anything to actually type there, but you know, I can edit in this view as well. But this is the view that I'm going to look at someday and say, you know what, we've defined actual stuff, implementations, you know, actual scenes to satisfy all the needs of these other nodes, but we don't have a big action for Act 2.1. That means I don't have, you know, I'm gonna have a really slow 2.1, and it's gonna kind of drag on and on and on, and I don't want to lose my readers, so I better brainstorm about what I could do to satisfy that requirement. So that's kind of how I'm hoping to use this software. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, comment, etc. And I'm gonna do another video after I've gone through and just sort of brain dumped into this outline here. Like I said, I have a story idea in my head that I came up with. It was sort of just a morning wake up dream, and I've just sort of been building on it and thinking about it. I've got characters, I've got some problems, sort of a general story arc for my main character at least. I've got a little bit about a story world, and so my next step, now that I've got this generalized outline for my plot structure that I've lifted off of stuff I've read and stuff I've written, I'm going to go and offline brain dump into this. When we come back, this mind map is going to be much more filled out, much more thick, and I'm just going to walk you through what I did, kind of what was in my head to begin with, and outline some of the things that I need to brainstorm. And then I'm going to look at using this tool with a fresh mind map, a blank slate, to do some brainstorming where I come up with new ideas to satisfy the holes, you know, the parts where for all of my brain dumping I wasn't able to come up with an answer or some sort of solution, something to write for that portion. So hopefully you found this all interesting, and as I said before, you know, stay tuned, ring that notification bell if you want to see as soon as I upload the next episode of this. This is going to be sort of an ongoing thing. Eventually I want to get to a point where we have a nice detailed set of scenes with descriptions and motives and characters and who wants what and who's going on and what are the stakes, you know, all of that covered. And I'm hoping to be able to do it all with this tool. And until then, I'll see you next time.